The River Darent runs for about 21 miles from Springs, just south of Westerham, through to the Thames at Dartford Creek. To look at it now, you wouldn't think that once it was a large shipping route. It's not much more than a stream in places, and even where it's busy, it's not a particularly large river. The reason being is that the springs have sprung a leak. The clay and the chalk have worn away, and a lot of the water now seeps through and actually comes out in the River Medway. But in times gone by, it was a busy, fast-flowing thoroughfare of a river. The Romans built many of their villas along its banks, and they would send in ships their goods back to Rome. There was a large number of mills along the edge of the River Darent, because the fast-flowing deep water would turn their large wheels. In the time of the Saxons, a Saxon warlord by the name of Eynsford came up the river, and he found there was only 3 crossing points, just 3 fords. As we know them today, there's one at Otford, one at Dartford and one at Eynsford. And he chose the one at Eynsford, and he decided that was where he was going to build his settlement. There was a good crossing point, just one of 3. There was good land, and so he set about building a settlement there. Him and his descendants gradually built an island that was defended with ditches, and in the middle they put a large 120-foot hall, which was the centre of their settlement. There was other dwellings outside, all protected by the river. The settlement was basically surrounded by the river, which protected them. They built a church facing the ford, up on high dry ground. They became important people, an important tribe. The warlord was an important person. Unbeknown to them, far away in France, there was a man called William, and he'd been offered the English crown when the king died. The king died, but the crown went to someone else, and William wasn't very happy about this, so he decided to invade and take the crown for himself. After all, it had been promised to him. So he gathered his knights, he went around and he said, look, come with me, help me raise an army, and when we defeat the English, you will share in the booty, and the booty being England. And so they set sail and they landed at Hastings, and they had a battle there, and they killed the king, Harold, and his associates, and they left there and they marched round England, wiping out any resistance. And then he turned to his knights and he said, right, okay, now it's payback time. Now I offered you part of England. And he said to the knight Unspac and his son Rolf, he said, right, I'm going to give you Eynsford. And they said, okay, thank you, Lord. And they went off to Eynsford and they looked around and they thought, well, this is quite nice. We've got a defended island here. It's already defended. We've got somewhere to live in the middle, a nice hall. There's a church, there's a ford. This is good ground, we're very lucky. And in gratitude for the king, Rolf renamed himself William de Eynsford. And then he set about building a large 20-foot curtain wall all around the island, with gates and a drawbridge and a tower for the gates, and a splendid castle it was too. About 30 or 40 years later they increased that to actually 30 foot high. And the Saxon hall that they'd been living in, they pulled that down and they built their own hall with living quarters and kitchens, and they had a nice home. And then he went and he thanked God and he went to the church and he pulled down the Saxon church and rebuilt his own church in his own style on top of the Saxon, where the Saxon church was, on their foundations. And he built his own church with stone, and he renamed it St Martin of Tours. St Martin of Tours being the favourite saint of King William. And here is the River Darren as we see it today. Obviously not particularly wide, not particularly deep, fairly well flowing there. Obviously in times gone by that would have been much wider, much deeper, but at least the flow is coming back. Never going to be back to where it was, but the ducks seem to be having a bit of trouble making some headway there, so obviously those houses were built much later than when the river was in full flight. And here we are at the ford. There's a 17th century bridge there that is about wide enough to take a car. Anything bigger than that needs to use the ford, so it is still in use today. Lorries, vans go across it. You could wade across it. On the bridge there, I think it's on the table there, it's about a foot at the moment. That medieval figure is actually an angel with their hands clasped together. And this is further downstream, not particularly wide there or particularly deep, but this is by the castle. And in times gone by, and certainly when the castle was first built, this banking there wouldn't have existed, and the river would have flooded straight across to the castle, which you can see there is an island. It's a man-made island, and the wall has fallen there. You can see great big chunks of the wall, and you can see with the railings there's actually concrete that's holding it up. But when the wall fell down, that's when they was able to tell that it had actually been a Saxon island. There was signs there of Saxon orientation with Norman building on top. Obviously the Normans built the wall round about. William de Eynsford the first built the curtain wall, and obviously the hall and the buildings within inside. There's no way we can see where the original Saxon hall was inside, as basically they built on top of it. Trenches have been dug to find exactly where it was, although there's nothing visible now. There is a curtain wall, as I say, that's 30 foot high in some places. That is how it would have looked with an artist's impression, with a moat round, and going across here there would have been a drawbridge part way, and then gates and gate tower, as you saw in the drawing there. Here's the remnants of the gate tower, most likely two gates, and they would have gone through this sort of tunnel affair, as you can see from this angle more easily, and that is how they would have first entered the castle. So fairly well protected, although not a castle to sustain attacks, not a fighting castle. This is Art's impression of what it looked like inside. On the far left there is the kitchens with a well beside, and then to the right, at the back of these buildings, was the original hall with buildings above, and then there's some additional buildings in front. This is the well, looking at it from the kitchen, looking across to the buildings, or what's left of them. Quite considerable really for its age and how it's been looked after. This is the solar, the undercroft of the solar, and quite an important person would have lived there. In this case, probably the bailey of the castle. He would have lived there, and that half circle there in the wall is where his fire and his kitchen were. The steps going up, obviously they weren't there, and that wasn't even an entrance at the time. That's just been put in for people today. The hole there, that was a toilet. There's 3 toilets in the castle. This is one of them, and they
soak away into the moat and obviously get washed away in the river. And there in the corner is the actual entrance. Now remember, this is a basement, and this is the stairs to it. You can see a number of Roman tiles on the walls there. The actual building is made of Kentish flint, and you can see the steps going up. And I say there's a lot of Roman tiles that have come from the villas round about. There's quite a few villas on the river, and there the steps go up, and that would be the ground floor level. Which and here's some more tiles. This is by the undercroft, or the basement of the hall, just to the side of the solar. This was the main part of the building. This would just been used for storage, quite a large area. And there again in the far corner is the staircase up, which in this instance is a spiral staircase. The Eynsford family only survived until 1261, and at that point the castle was split between the Kirkby and the Creole families. Now here's the spiral staircase, although it's not a staircase here anymore. It's been worn away and just repaired as a slope, but you can see it goes up to the ground floor, and that's where the hall, and if you can just look along there, you can see where there would have been a passageway between those two walls, and that would have been the great hall with the windows at the back there. And this is looking at the front of the building, and where this extension was added on later, a few decades after the original hall was put there. And obviously I needed more space, the family was growing, and they've added on rooms and various areas there. And yeah, the Kirkby and the Creoles, they didn't get on at all, and it was most unsatisfactory, and the conflict between the two finally culminated in 1312 when the Kirkby, so fed up, they sold the castle to Judge William Inge. Well, the Creoles went absolutely berserk. They ransacked the castle so badly that it was abandoned and never lived in it again. And it stayed like that until the mid-18th century, when Hart Dyke, the family of Hart Dyke from Lullingstone, they acquired it, and they used it for the kennelling of the hounds and the stables, and stayed like that really until 1934, when English Heritage took over it. And as you can see, they're doing work there on that far wall to repair and look after it. There's various holes in that wall which weren't part of the original castle, but they were put in by the Hart Dykes when they used it for kennelling and stables. And here we are back at the Ford, and directly up from the Ford is the church, which was built by the William de Eynsford I, and he built it on top of the Saxon foundations, renamed it, rededicated it to St Martin's of Tours, who was William the Conqueror's favourite saint. And the wall there, that was moved back 2.5 metres in 1961 to make room for the pavement. The Lich Gate, dedicated to in 1920, built in 1920, and dedicated to Elliot Downes Till, a local benefactor who did much for the village and for the church. The West Tower, as you can see there, that was added in the 13th century. And there's the porch that was added on just after the tower was built. the clock that was repaired in 1904, and our friend Elliot Downes Till added the words of Robert Browning inscribed on the oak frame of the clock: "Grow old alone with me, the best is yet to be." And there we see the Norman arch, the original arch of the building, and just at the side there is the door, and that is a 12th century door that was slammed in the face of the new rector in 1163, who had been appointed by Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, during his conflict with Henry II and the barons, and the king instructed William de Eynsford the third to not let the rector in, and he slammed the door in the face, and Becket excommunicated him. And there was that's where the gallery used to be, and that was taken down, and the arms of King George III replaced it. Chapels were added either side to the nave to form the traditional cross, and the chapel of St Catherine on the north side is now the vestry. The Lady Chapel, originally dedicated to St John the Baptist, has the only piece of stained glass in the building. The 15th century font was originally at the door where fonts are traditionally placed, but they moved it in 1967 to make space for the organ console. As the manor prospered, improvements were made, and the walls were plastered, if you can count that as improvements, and the arches are still the early English style of the 11th and 12th century. And because it was built on the old Saxon foundations, and because the rising land, the top of the chancel where the altar is situated did not actually face due east.
On the 3rd of May 1830, the world's first passenger rail service commenced between Canterbury and Whitstable. Within 14 years, the South Eastern Railway had connected London to Dover via somewhat of a circuitous route. It would be 17 years before another route to London was found by the London, Chatham and Dover Railway. The race was now on to connect up as many towns and villages throughout Kent as possible. The two companies competed for every line. One of the villages to benefit from this was Eynsford. In 1862, the Sevenoaks and Swanley line was opened, with a station stopping at Eynsford. A freight depot was there, sheds. The benefits to the villages were obvious. They could now get their produce to the London markets within hours rather than days.
The Swanley to Sevenoaks Baton Ball line opened to passenger traffic on the 2nd of June 1862, and Eynsford came into use a month later on the 1st of July. Compared to the usual architectural work of the London, Chatham and Dover Railway, the station building here was somewhat to behold. The main two-storey building is positioned on the downside and boasts chimney stacks worthy of Tudor premises. The arch window frames was a favourite feature of the old C&DR. By the 1980s, the building really was in a filthy, dilapidated state, and well, just cosmetic restoration was carried out, as can be seen. The line was initially a single track, and double track was put in just over a year later, in July, and they put it in August of the following year. On the upside, there's a modest timber waiting shelter, and that looks like I think that's been there right from the start, and it even featured elaborate valance, in addition to a wraparound sides for improved protection from the elements, although the side lengths of the canopy valance were removed in the 1970s. Goods traffic increased. There was sidings put in for freight, and together with a freight shed, goods shed, and a lot of freight was transferred from the river to trains. Unfortunately, by by the 20th century, roads had taken over from rail, and by 1962 the goods traffic ceased, and the shed was closed, and the whole area turned over to a car park. And just outside of Eynsford is this impressive 9-arch red brick viaduct, a 30-foot span, which rises to a height of 75 feet above the valley.
I hope you've enjoyed some of the history of Eynsford. Join me next time when we'll look at the history of somewhere else in Kent.